Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm super excited to be here. Glad to see all of you in the audience. This is actually the launch of our white paper, Open Data and Future Customer Experiences. It's launched this week. We're really happy to bring it to you here as part of our panel discussion today. And I know a lot of people have a hard time fidgeting, on your phone during these sorts of sessions. So I've got something for you to do with that. Download our white paper. It's at da.com.au and it's a great read, and you can read along and join in with all the themes that we'll be covering today in our discussion. So quick introduction. There are two Alexes and two Davids on this panel. I'm Victoria. I'm the communications manager. So if you talk to us afterwards, you've got roughly a 50% chance of getting the right name. So this is Alex Stevanovic from Data Action. This is David Fodor from AWS, David Cook from Data Action or DA, and Alex Yen from DA. So thank you all for joining us. As I said, we want to have an open, creative discussion about what happens next as Open Data and CDR rolls out across various industries, and talk about some of those exciting customer experiences that you can develop and really try and move the conversation beyond the regulatory situation that we're in right now. And we want to, get beyond those challenges, get creative, imagine and capture those interesting future use cases so that we can build towards them and become more open across industries, partnering with each other. And I think really key to all of that is not being afraid to iterate. You don't have to build the biggest experience in one go. You need to start slowly and build creatively towards something bigger. So, David, F, could you just kind of take us through a bit of a snapshot of the story of data so far beyond Australia? What's happening in other markets? Where are they at? What kind of use cases are they seeing with big uptake amongst customers?
Sure, Victoria, is this on? Yep. I thought long and hard about how to tackle this because it's such a massive agenda and a massive story in such a short space of time. I think using some Amazon language in terms of the way that we think about things, we're really at what we call day one for open data, not just locally but globally. Locally, I'll come back to the situation under CDR, but globally, with like markets who are leading open data regimes under a regulatory-driven agenda, generally look at the UK and the European situation under PSD2 as the sort of the leading light in terms of where it's going and the maturity of that market. If you look at the stats, you'd have to say that participation in that market is actually reasonably good. There's now in excess of about 500 third-party payment providers in that market. In the UK alone, over 4 million participants in open banking. And I think in 2021 in the UK market, there was in excess of about 10 billion pounds sterling worth of transactions that were actually submitted through an open banking transaction paradigm. So, and growing at the rate of around about 300% year on year. So we would expect over the course of 2022 for that number to grow to somewhere between high 20s, early 30 billion pound per annum. Now, having said all that, PSD2 is very much a payments and action-oriented driven agenda. Ours is not. They are tackling a couple of the problems that I think we'll need to look at down the track, particularly around the requirements for re-authentication. They have a 90-day re-authentication process that is leading to some significant dropout in participation in open banking. So that's one sort of hurdle that we need to navigate going forward. But having said that, I think that after a very slow start in that market, the momentum in API calls and value transactions that are occurring is actually now getting some critical mass. Coming back locally under CDR, obviously the last couple of years has been very much a data out focus, heavy compliance oriented agenda. We're only really now seeing organisations turn their attention to data in any way, shape or form. But I still feel that CDR and open banking and beyond that open finance in this market is really a solution looking for a problem at the moment. Elizabeth Kelly, who's driving the review of the CDR program at the moment, has said it's now up to business to create consumer value by developing an innovative CDR products and services. And I think that's a really good indicator that market forces now need to prevail and lead on the basis of finding that true transfer of utility between consumers and those organisations that are looking for access to their data. That's what we're looking for. So I think a long way to go. I'm really interested to see energy come online this year, and then beyond that, we've got the papers out for non-bank lending, and then beyond that, insurance and superannuation coming in to really start to create the critical mass of open finance beyond just banking. So we'll wait and see.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of questions about how to bridge that gap, and I guess one of them is like you've got to create that value, you've got to create those use cases. And Alex, that brings us really nicely to something I want to ask you. So, you know, if you strip away all the complication or the legislation and you put the customer in the spotlight, what happens then?
I think it's a really good question, Vic, and I think it really ties nicely with what you've said just before, David. Really for us, when we tackle this question, or when we look to talk through the white paper in its creation and the reading that came with it and all the rest of it, is customers today, or even ourselves internally as an organisation, the mind share and the space, time, effort and resource taken just to do the legislation component of it, to dot the I's and cross the T's, and it's absolutely needed and warranted, but to do that has taken up a lot of time and space in the brain for customers looking to get those outcomes. And I think now as we sort of start to tick off some of those items off the to-do list, you sort of step back and think, okay, well, what's next? And really for customers, and even the conversations that we're starting to have internally and customers approaching us within DA, is what's the possibility? And so I think there's a macro view as well as a micro view within that. So there is an interest and there is a growing appetite in terms of understanding what is actually out there and what's that possibility. Because once we zoom out and once all of these things start to come into play, there's a lot there, and it's hard to provide or hard to know where to go in some cases. There are, I guess, a spectrum of customer kind of readiness within this space, this industry, and sort of beyond. And we look at it particularly from a sense of, well, on one end, you have customers who are maybe just starting within the cloud process, and that's new for them. And then on the other side, you have those that are ready for, you know, your robot overlords to come in and take the day. So there's everything between that spectrum to try and manage. And so what we look at from that perspective is being a little bit more led in the sense of, I guess, mentorship, providing that scaffolding for those ideas to grow, and even leading some of that use cases within this space. And so as we bring it down to the micro sense of that word, is really customers are asking us, well, what can we do today? It doesn't have to be revolutionary. It doesn't have to be these whiz-bang products that are going to save the day and you know, start a new world. It's really looking at what is, you know, the downstream impacts, what are the customer pain points, what are the frustrations, and what are the use cases that exist, and how do you help smooth some of those frictions and some of those processes that exist today. And you kind of overlay the concepts that are coming to light more and more, and I think it's also about the education as well. So taking some of that fear, the hesitancy out of it, and we start small to build trust and sort of go from there. And in the white paper, I'll give it a bit of a plug, but I won't give it all away. We do talk about some of these use case experiences. We kind of categorise them as 4 critical categories. In no way, shape or form is that, you know, the end of it. It's just something that we've observed to date. And so the main 2, I guess, that are probably more real for customers in this space is those around around smarter startups and smarter access. So really looking at the onboarding and the activation processes as key critical items for customers today. And it's not about, again, taking something brand new. It's about looking at the environment, at the ecosystem, all the points that exist today. And some, you know, exist as little islands. Some need a little bit more integration, and others are connected to an ecosystem. But how is that sort of end-to-end look now, and how can we sort of update and uplift those processes going forward? And, you know, you've got things like the facial recognition coming into play. How do you take the digital footprint and increase that? And how do you maybe start to merge and blend potentially the online and the branch experiences as well? So really, as a consumer, at the end of the day, wherever I stop or wherever I pick up, it should be something that I could, you know, keep on doing as part of it. And the other one within that that I think is more nice, I guess it's nicer from an overall point of view, is the mindful money. And that's really talking about the more conscientious investor, saver, spender, whatever use case persona you want to overlay on that. But they're really looking at how can we bring to light or bring to life those ESG principles that are becoming more and more important in the world in which we operate today, and taking some of those use cases and bringing them back into the fore. And it might not be the best initially, but we have to start somewhere. And CO2 emissions and kind of bubbling up and raising that data and that information and presenting it, even though it might be reactive in the first place, I think it gives us a starting point to start educating, to start changing the conversation, and to start changing those discussions with our customers, but also their end users, to get them thinking about this world in a different way, and being okay to share and accept that data as they kind of work through that. So I'd like to see the CO2 stuff take that next layer. Tell me at that point of sale, or even as I'm making those decisions, show me what that decision actually means downstream. Am I going left? Am I going right? Depending on what that is. So for me, I think overall it's around building that trust initially. It doesn't have to be whiz-bang products. I mean, it definitely can be if they exist, but I think it's starting small and looking at those use cases that exist today and sort of smoothing those transitions as we go. Thanks, Vic.
Thank you. Alex and I worked really hard on the white paper, and it's really we must be big data nerds, I think, because it's a really creative process thinking about these use cases, and it's the sky's the limit really. So I do encourage you to download it and give it a read. A lot of hard work went into it. David Cook, your turn. What do you think fintechs? We're at Intersekt 2022, and it's like a fintech conference. What should be top of mind for people in this space, in this industry, as part of this?
Yep, thanks. So I think the last moderator stole one of my favourite quotes, which is a Bill Gates quote. The quote goes, it's you always underestimate or overestimate what you'll achieve in 2 years and underestimate what you'll achieve in 10. But he missed a very important bit at the end of that quote, which is don't get lulled into inaction because of that. And I can think of a couple of things that come to mind for me in the time I've sort of worked in fintech. So the first is 2016, I went to a conference in Singapore, the Singapore FinTech Festival. They were expecting 800 delegates to go to that conference, and it took them about 2 years to organise it. And by the time they held it, they had 4,500 people show up. And the Monetary Authority of Singapore, who were the sponsors of that, really struggled with actually running that conference at that point in time, but it was a fairly generic conference. At the time, FinTech in Singapore was one floor in one building out to the western side of the island, and by the time they ran that conference the following year, they had 13,000 delegates. FinTech in Singapore was about 11 buildings, including a 25-storey office building in the centre of Singapore. And the Monetary Authority of Singapore had actually completely changed their operating model in terms of how they dealt with FinTech. So they actually split the business, so the regulatory side of the business operated separately, but also together in a sense with the innovation side of the business to help FinTechs engage in the market. And that actually came back to some of our regulators at that point in time. The reason I bring that up is because in the space of a year, that exploded in Singapore. So like I said, you can overestimate what might happen in 2, but what might happen very quickly is those use cases that Alex is talking about will come to the fore, right? So if we think about data sort of being the modern currency and all user experience is built on data, it really just comes back to that value proposition that exists for people. What is the job to be done that requires that data that results in that experience? And that's sort of the key thing. And all of my observations of fintech with time are just that it'll just pop on you before you realise it. So the one of the last speakers talked about resilience and sort of getting through things. I remember being in a federal treasury panel for distributed ledger technology back in 2016. I've actually seen a couple of familiar faces in the room. And we were just spitballing ideas around what might be used in terms of taxation and finance and banking, and there's a whole bunch of different ideas, and that resulted in some work that was done by Data 61. But then it sort of went quiet for a couple of years, and as you've probably seen, crypto and all the things around DLT sort of really exploded onto the scene. So it's just another really good example of just be prepared, and the regulators are equally unprepared, is my experience. And it's just knowing how to work with them and understand they're going through the same growing pains that you're going through, and just be resilient and work through that, particularly in financial services where it can be a little bit more difficult to get through, I guess, those initial stages.
Who drives the change when it accelerates to that extent? Can you identify, or can you see into the future when those kind of prevailing winds are coming?
Look, I don't think you can see into the future. I was at a session this morning where someone said something along the lines of, they were talking about a myth about open data, and the question was, do consumers engage with open data? Is that right? Is that the right one? And the reality is consumers don't engage with open banking or open data. Consumers engage with the use cases. So you really just have to go, I go back to it, right? The value proposition is, what is the job that client is, or that customer is trying to achieve, and how will data support that, and really just start hedging bets on that basis, right? And that'll lead, I guess, to the outcome. And you're not going to win all the time, but that's just the nature of that sort of business.
Thank you. Alex, a very big question to you then. Like, in terms of enablement, how can we really activate the sorts of things we want to see happen within the industry, and especially when the ecosystem is going to be very large, it feels like?
Thanks, Vic. You asked me to come up with a joke about open banking. This is the best that I could do. Knock, knock.
Who's that?
Open banking.
Open banking who?
And that's what consumers would say. But I guess we have to get ahead of the game. We've got a pretty strong and mature FinTech environment or community here in Australia. Been working with screen scraping technology for many years and delivering great experiences and products. But at the moment, there seems to be limited open banking initiated use cases out there. That's because I think, again, it's they're waiting for the CDR to surpass what they can actually currently do through screen scraping. But the banks who have been currently under a lot of obligation pressure to offer up data holder are probably looking for fintechs to help them enable their own ADR capabilities. And I think it's a great opportunity for fintechs at the moment. I think if they have the right product, I think the timing is kind of perfect.
I mean, I think really what you're talking about there is partnership, and it's big and small partnership. Like when you're talking about some of the big four, they need to lean on some, really innovative, smaller companies that would fit into that fintech bucket. But I suppose I feel like amongst the people who are here today, I think partnership is going to be the future for sure. How do you sort of view it?
And I could take a DA lens on that. Our clients themselves, they want to differentiate, they want to be unique, they want to do it now, and they want to do it at low cost. And we know that partnerships are key for that because taking 12 months to develop and bring something to market, it's not acceptable anymore, and the expectation is like months, if not weeks. Right? So that's a challenge for us, and as I said, partnerships are key. What we're looking for in partnerships are innovation, and speed to market, and maybe like a cost model that suits us and our clients, whether it's aggregated cost model, a success-based cost model, or we've seen some companies overseas offer their services for free, and that's probably the best cost model that I can think of.
Thank you. David Fodor, I wanted to throw back to you because I am not from a traditional tech background. It's been part of my history for a while. But as I said, I've brought a creative lens to this. And to my mind, it feels like for some of these use cases that it's about reverse engineering. Is that possible? Is that the way to do it from your perspective? Is that a good way to design? You come up with the experience and you find a way to make the tech work for you?
Yes.
Done.
So, short answer is yes. We at Amazon believe it's the best way. It may not be the only way, but we believe it's the best way. We have the saying, unless you know otherwise, it's what we do. For every product or service that we bring to market across all of our lines of business, we run a process called working backwards, which is exactly what you described. It's not new. It's nothing. It's not rocket science. It's basically just starting with the end in mind. We solve for 5 questions. Who is the customer? What are their problems or the opportunities related to that customer? Does the idea that you have actually go to solving those problems or adding value to that idea? How do you know that what you'll develop is what they want? And only then do you then go and design the customer experience around that. It really prevents you doing a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of journey mapping, and then coding, and then packaging, and throwing that over the fence to your marketing team to go and take to market, only to find that actually there's no demand out there for what you've developed. We run that process and then we run it to an MVP, or what we call a minimum lovable product stage, and then iterate on it from there. So I think in the context of open data and the future of what customer experience looks like, that is the methodology that we bring to the table for our customers who want to invest and actually tip capital into that market. There are some really, I think, primary use cases that are just still screaming out to be solved for in this market. I think one thing that's not well understood and regarded about this market versus other mature banking markets around the world is just the nature of our credit bureau experience today, and the additional value that open data brings to the information that is available for consumers when they're applying for credit. So I think there's still a lot of value that we can get out there, just even there, before venturing into other, related use cases beyond that. But in short, to answer your question, absolutely. As I said before, it's today, in my opinion, a matter of CDR being a solution that we've now got to design some real, inventive problems around for it to actually feed into.
The original reverse engineer, basically.
Yeah.
So the kind of use cases you're talking about, they're kind of like first order priority for you.
Absolutely. And I'm from a hardcore credit risk management background, so I still see the value in risk and pricing as being one of the primary spaces to get a high ROI on any investments that we make in open data. I know it's a contentious area though, because anything that you do with respect to bespoke risk and pricing comes with it an element of, is that really the right thing for customers who are at different ends of the risk spectrum? But from a consumer experience perspective of demonstrating that you have a depth of knowledge about what they are, particularly from a behavioural sense in terms of their transactional behaviour data, it's really a bit of a no-brainer.
Well, could save a lot of pain for people in a time of like rising interest rates and things like that. If you,
There's no better time now. We've been living in a almost zero cost of capital environment for so long. Now is the time to reinvest as the cycle reverses. Absolutely.
Yeah. We are very close to time. Alex, I just wanted to know what is like top of your mind in terms of use cases? Like, what do you want to see happen first? Is it in that ESG area? Is it Internet of Things? What gets you excited about open data?
Open data, I think there is those standard basic ones that we just need to get right, and I think you're absolutely right, David, in that sense. I like to come at it from a different angle, maybe a little bit more from a lens of IoT, and that's a parallel that I sort of draw with that kind of item when it comes to open data in itself. So I kind of look around, and I'm not the only one, everybody's sort of in the room. You've got your mobile phones in one hand, you've got your watches that no longer just tell the time, they tell you everything about your life. You go to the roads, you've got your cars, you get home, your smart devices, left, right and centre. And so I like to play with the idea of the fridge being smart, or being smarter than it is today. And so for me, I kind of look at it with the sense of a product development sense of how can I include things that are meaningful to me but also seamless, that are just taking the boring, dull things and letting the robots handle it, basically. So I look at the smart fridge, and today your fridges, you can do a grocery list. So what if in this new future that we look to move towards, if that fridge now has pocket money? It has the change to do the basic ordering for you. It's smart enough to connect to the comparison websites and, Coles, Woolies, whatever it is, Aldi, wherever you shop, it does the shop for you at the best price. It orders that, groceries wherever local, and it's waiting there at your door. I think we need something to help us put that away, but at least it gets to your door. And it's more just not a completely revolutionary item of, hey, the robot's going to go shop for me and I'm going to come back and everything's going to be done. But it's more of the sense of these things exist today. It's how do we stitch it together to create some of those nice, delightful, seamless experiences that are innocent, but also put that trust out there from a consumer's perspective. So not quite banking in the traditional sense, but something a little bit further out than that is potentially real and tangible today.
We're very close to time, so lightning round for you, other David and other Alex. What kind of use cases would you like to see kind of kick off? What makes you think this could be an exciting product or experience?
I just think the right access coming in eventually is going to be a game changer. Having one organisation being able to close off another account and open up another account with a third party It's going to be endless possibilities, and especially when you start introducing the other sectors, and just think there's endless opportunity, and we're at the very start of it, so it's pretty exciting times, and we're going to be leading the world on a lot of these things. So I think it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, there's a lot of smart people in the room and building out these ideas, so we want to connect and be able to, meet you and have a chat to you, and and try and help us on our journey to get and to achieve our goals.
Great. Final word to you, David.
I've got a family friend, and she's just got a new boyfriend, so we got a bit on a tangent here.
I like it.
And he had a very expensive car that he rolled up to our house in, and then I found out that he actually lined landfill sites. So that, to me, and my experience sort of suggests that sometimes the best opportunities are in the really unsexiest areas, and they're also sometimes the lowest risk areas, because they're the things that other people don't want to do because they're just too hard. So sometimes I sit back and go, is it really in PFM and some of those applications, or is it more in counterparty risk in sort of bigger transactions, or is there something in that space that might make more sense as a lower risk option and probably a lower exposure option from a consumer perspective, especially in light of the Financial Services Royal Commission? I think that creates some real sensitivities around consumer. I just wonder if there's something in that space.
Thank you. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today. As I said, if you want to download our white paper, we've got a very short URL, da.com.au. We are a core banking services and solutions and digital services and solutions provider. We've been in the market for 36 years. We just had our birthday. We're so young, so much potential. And thank you so much. We really are excited about the future. We think partnership is key. We think trust is key. We think that consumers need to learn to trust through these exciting experiences that we're hoping to develop. So come and say hi if you see any of us around. Thanks so much.